Chapter 12. Cole. Cole watched as Cara's eyes lingered on the unconscious man, even as they stepped out of the room, and a nurse helped them remove their gear. She knew something. He could tell from the slight tensing of her jaw and the folding under of her bottom lip. "What do you have him on?" she asked the doctor.
"Ceftizidime," the doctor replied, "but it's too early to tell if it's working. I just started him on it half an hour ago."
"Did he check himself in, or was he brought in?"
"Brought in. We don't even have his name. Still searching for some identification. The woman who brought him in is out in the waiting room, if you want to talk to her. I don't think she knows him, but she seemed determined to stay until she knew he was okay."
The vein in Cara's neck pulsed as she nodded. "Thanks, Nick. Keep me informed if you can. If he does test positive, we need to call the CDC.
He nodded. "Already have the number programmed in my cell phone."
The vein popped a little more as Cara's lips mashed together. "Thanks, Nick." When they were free of their gear, the nurse led them to the sanitizing area so they could wash their hands. Questions burned in Cole's throat, but he waited until they were cleared and out of earshot to pose them.
"What aren't you saying?"
Cara inhaled deeply and scratched at her forehead. "I don't know exactly. The timeline bothers me for one. Nick is right that this disease seems to have no set timeline, but to already be in his bloodstream? That makes me think he could have had it when he attacked me and killed Steve, which also seems unlikely."
"Would he not have had the strength?"
Cole wasn't as familiar with this disease as Cara was, but if it was as serious as she claimed, he could see why she would be confused. Her hand traveled to the back of her neck and rubbed absently. "I mean, I suppose it's possible he would have the strength, but I don't see how he could have sneaked up on me if he had a cough. Also, if he had it before he attacked Steve, then where did he get it? Steve had the samples of the live virus and the infected mice. Something just doesn't feel right."
"Is it possible he infected himself, stealing the virus from Steve and just progressed rapidly?"
"It's possible, especially if he has some underlying condition. I've read of people that showed symptoms within a day and others that didn't show symptoms for over 50 years. That's another thing that makes this disease so dangerous." She shook her head, as if trying to grab a fleeting thought. "I suppose I need to do more research when we get back to the B&B." Cole knew she would do just that. The woman was meticulous from everything he'd seen the last few days. Even her workstation was never cluttered. Everything had a place, and the desk was wiped down after every use.
"That's not all, though, is it?"
A frustrated breath passed over her lips. "No, that man in there seems familiar, and he looked at me as if he recognized me. But I can't place whether I know him from here or somewhere else. Of course, it doesn't help that he looks so pale right now." Cole placed a hand on her arm. Along with her meticulousness, Cara had a trait of beating herself up over things she didn't get quickly or couldn't control. It was something he understood, but he also understood how that trait could eat away at you.
"It will come to you. Why don't we go talk to the woman? Maybe she can help us figure out who he is."
Cara flashed a brief smile and squeezed his hand before returning the way they'd come. Cole paused at the nursing station, intending to ask who had brought the man in, but Cara continued to the waiting room. When he caught up to her, he realized why. Only one woman was in the room. Her head was tilted down, sending her dark locks fanning across her face and hiding her features. "Excuse me, miss?" Cara's voice was softer than he had ever heard it, so she did possess a compassionate side. He'd only seen the stronger sides of her, the stubborn, take-charge, no-nonsense sides. Though he had found her attractive before, he found his attraction to her increasing with every new piece he discovered. The woman lifted her head. Wide brown eyes stared up at them. "Yes?" Her voice was softer than Cara's and held a note of Defeat? Are you the woman who brought in the man with the fever? The woman nodded. I don't know him, but he was all alone, and I don't think anyone should be all alone. I told them I wanted to stay until I found out how he was doing. Do you know? Cole not only heard the desperation in her words, but he could see it in the woman's face. Though young, there were wrinkles by her eyes and along the corners of her mouth that hinted at the rougher hand she'd been dealt. He had no doubt from the way her hands continually twisted that she was speaking from experience, and the investigator in him wondered what her story was. I know Dr. Pearson has him on some medicine that should help him. My name is Cara Hunter, and this is my friend, Cole Davenport. Do you think we could ask you some questions about earlier? The woman's thin shoulders lifted and then fell. I guess so. Cara smiled as she sat down in the seat next to the woman. Can you tell us where you found the man? He was outside the church, walking through the garden. I thought that was odd because usually the only people I see out there are the pastor or the women who run the food pantry. I approached him to ask who he was, but he was rambling some sort of nonsense about a woman named Sarah. I asked him who she was, but before he answered me, he fell to the ground. He was too heavy to lift, and no one was around, so I called an ambulance. That was the right thing to do, Cara said, touching the woman's arm. You probably saved his life. You said he was in the garden, though. Was he doing anything? Carrying anything? The woman squeezed her eyes shut, as if trying to conjure a mental memory. Yes, he had a watering can, but I don't remember the ground being wet. Her eyes opened, and she looked at Cara and then Cole. Maybe he hadn't started watering yet? The cold sliver of dread coursed through Cole, and as he caught Cara's eyes, he knew she was thinking the same thing. Had he been poisoning the garden? Or had he become delirious before he'd started? Thank you. I just have one more question for now. Can you tell me which church? Yeah, the Baptist one on Main. When the vein pulsed in Cara's neck again, Cole knew that was not the information she had been hoping to hear. Thank you. Cole pulled a card from his wallet as he spoke up for the first time. If you remember anything else, will you call us? The woman looked at him, nodded, and tucked the card in her pocket before dropping her head again. We have to go, now. Cara hissed as they moved away from the woman. That church? It's the biggest one in town, and that garden not only supplies the food pantry, but there's a group of volunteers who tend it. If that food goes out, or even if they touch the soil, we'll have a lot more cases on our hands. The dread grew within Cole as they reached the car. He could only hope they would get there in time.